We in the West, and especially America, love our freedom. And when I say especially America, I mean like especially America. There's many idols America has and idols that Christian America has, and freedom is definitely up there. I would say has to be one of the top 3 idols and sins that we hold on to in America. It's our freedom. We can do what we want. We're free. And it's like, well, not really, because Jesus says to lay down your life, lay down your rights. When you come to Jesus, you give up your rights. Yes, America gives you freedom, but Jesus calls you to lay down your freedom and become a slave to Christ, become a slave to righteousness. And the question in America is, for us Christians, what is freedom? What does this mean? How do we use freedom? And a lot of people like to say, well, I'm free to do what I want. And this is something that Paul talked about with the Corinthians a lot in the Galatians was, hey, you guys are free. Yeah, stop sinning, And so what is true freedom? That is something that every human is probably asking, but us in America need to ask ourselves. If we're going to love being a free country, then as Christians in America, we need to understand what true freedom is. Not the American way of freedom, but Jesus's way of freedom. What is Jesus's way of freedom? Because not all freedoms are understood equal, right? Yes, the American version of freedom is a big idol, but if we can tap into what Jesus really means when he says, whom the Son sets free is free indeed, that is where we will find our fulfillment in life. And this topic came up briefly. They didn't go super deep into it spiritually like I want to in this video, but in the Jordan Peterson podcast, he was talking to this woman who runs a school in the UK. Apparently she's super strict and people and the children are happy. So we're going to get into it and listen to what she says, because I don't know if she's a Christian, but there's some really big Christian, what do you call it? Philosophies or truths in here. So let's watch this.
Actually only possible within the confines of a shared community. And so, your opponents might say, well, look how strict you are with the children. They have no freedom. But your rejoinder is something like, no, we establish a community with boundaries and walls so that people know what the expectations are with regards to upward striving. And then within that, they have true freedom.
That's right.
I'll give you an example.
Exactly
this
it.
is a cool
That is
a cool example.
True freedom requires restriction. Yes, go on.
Well,
okay, so that's what I want to talk about. True freedom requires restriction. Now, us in the West are like, what are you talking about, man? No, I don't want any restrictions. I want to sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. I want to do as many drugs as I want to do. I want to binge as much TV as I want to binge. I want to, have as much food as I want. I want to do whatever. It's all free. I can eat what I want. I can go have whatever I want. And it's true in our culture. You can eat whatever you want. You can sleep with whoever you want. You can do as many drugs in some states as much as you want. You can drink as much as you want until the bartender kicks you out. You go home and drink some more. There's that reality. You can do what you want is true in America, but so many people are slaves to those things. It's ironic. You are puffed up with pride in your freedom, but you're a slave to your vices that you want your freedoms to do. And so this idea of this freedom in restriction is so awesome, so beautifully said, and definitely something that is true. The Bible says, who the Son sets free is free indeed. Paul says in Galatians, here I'll pull it up real quick. Paul says in Galatians that you are called to freedom, brothers, only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. So yes, you're free. Christ has freed you, but that doesn't mean you're free to do what you want. It means you're free to do what you should. In Romans 7, we talked about this in a video a while ago, like a couple weeks ago, and Romans 7's all about like maybe the pre-Christian or the non-Christian saying, I can't do what I want to do, and I want to do, I don't do, and I don't know how to overcome this sinful body. And the flip side of that is in Christianity, it's you have defeated sin through Christ. You have overcome sin through Christ, and now you're free to do what you want. You can honor God. You can put to death these sinful things. You can have this freedom. So what does that mean? There's freedom in restriction in context of Christianity. Well, Christians are restricted from sinning. We can't get drunk. We can't get high. We can't sleep with whoever we want. We can't eat as much as we want, which no one talks about gluttony. Gluttony, I've been thinking about making a video on gluttony because no one talks about it. And I feel like we should talk about it because it's one of those sins that just gets dismissed. How many people are in the pulpit struggling with gluttony and no one's like, hey, go fix your sin issue? But, someone is having an alcohol problem, yeah, get them out of the pulpit. But overeating, nah, it's fine. And I'm like, well, no, gluttony is a sin, Okay, anyways, off my soapbox to my other soapbox that I was on previously. This idea of freedom and restriction. To be a Christian, you walk the narrow road. But the thing about the narrow road is just like they had this picture of a walled arena and you have freedom in that arena. That's true. Studies are done on it. Kids have more fun and less anxiety when they're put in a playpen with borders because they know that's where the play happens and anything goes in that area. But if you put them in the whole room and you say play in the whole room, they get overwhelmed. People having too many choices gives them anxiety, and humans need guardrails. It's just, you can't get rid of it. It's just how it is. And so Jordan Peterson uses this idea of this tower with these walls and, it's understood the rules and stuff. But Jesus uses the term of a narrow path. He says, the way into eternal life is a narrow path. And so a narrow path is restrictive, but guess what? It's easy to follow. I was on a hike and I was on a narrow path. And that's when the thing clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is what Jesus meant. Okay. I used to look at the narrow path and be like, God, why is it narrow? I want to have fun. I want to go out and do this and do that. God, why did you make it narrow? Why do I have to give up all these things to follow you? Those things kill you. It's like a little kid asking his mom, why can't I touch the stove? Why can't I play in the road? It's like, because a car is going to hit you, because you'll burn yourself, I'm sorry, I'm trying to save your life. You can't see it right now because, you want to be a rebellious little kid, but it's actually for your good. And that's the same thing for us following Jesus. I've said this time after time, after video after video. God's commands are for our flourishing, that we would live a life that is fulfilling. When you follow Jesus, there's freedom. That you are just, you're at rest, you're at peace. I could go on forever talking about the lengths of freedom I found the more I surrender and the more I struggle to, I surrendered this much, and God's like, well, I want you to go up here. And I'm like, well, that's a high jump. That's kind of hard. But when I make that jump of surrender, there's so much more freedom. It's like, this is amazing. And so I'm telling you, as I've experienced this and I see it in the Bible, if you follow God's commands, you will find freedom. No more shame, no more guilt, no more anxiety, no more depression, no more hiding, no more feeling you have to put up a face and pretend to be okay. You'll actually be okay. Like, this is like Jesus talks about, the Psalm talks about in God's presence is joy and his right hand pleasures forevermore. That's true. And that doesn't mean life's going to be perfect, but it means through the hardship, you'll have purpose and you will have joy, because the fruit of the Spirit is joy. And that's deep. That's what God can give you. You can't access that if you're not living in God's ways. So back to this idea of freedom. Paul says to the Galatians, don't use your freedom for sin. Use it for love. So true freedom, Jesus' freedom, doesn't free us to do what we want. It frees us to do what we should. We should follow God. And we're incapable of doing that without the freedom from sin that he promises. So when we put our faith in Jesus and he frees us from sin, then we're free to follow him and free to experience what he has for us. And so we want freedom, just not the American, Western, selfish, me-centered freedom of I want to do what I want to be my own God. We want the freedom that, okay, I'm going to restrict myself so I can have the freedom. I'm not going to go get drunk. I'm not going to sleep around. I'm not going to overeat. And I am going to love my neighbor, and I am going to pray for my family, and I am going to read my Bible, and I am going to worship, and I am going to pray, and I'm going to make these things important, and I am going to give to the poor and be generous, and I am going to stand up against injustice. We restrict ourselves to obeying God's command, and we find the most fulfilling, fruitful life imaginable. So I encourage you and challenge you, if you haven't done that, if you haven't committed yourself to following the commands of Jesus, do that. That goes for Christians too. It's ironic because Christian means little Christ, so we should be walking in the way of Jesus. Some of us aren't. So Christian, stop slacking. Get to it. Non-Christian, get saved. Get rid of, why are you striving to solve all your problems yourself. You can't do it. You need Jesus. Aren't you tired of carrying the weight of the world, of your own fulfillment on your shoulders? Jesus has the answers and you need him. So give your life to Jesus. Anyways, see you in the next video.